Welcome into the Field Vision Football Podcast. I am Felix Johnson, joined by our head of football operations, Cody Alexander. Cody, how you doing today?
Doing great, man.
Awesome. Joined by Tyler Schoon, co-host of the Guilty as Charged podcast, covering the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan. We'll start there. Cody is a Denver Broncos fan. So we got a whole AFC West corral here. We can exclude the Raiders because
no one likes
I'm glad you didn't invite them. I'd have to leave. Yeah,
they're fine. We'll probably talk to a Raiders guy here in a couple weeks and take everything we said back. But whatever. Who cares about them right now? And so I want to start off obviously with Jim Harbaugh. It's the easiest thing to start 2024 off with. And I've always been a big fan of what Coach Harbaugh has been able to do with the Chargers, with Stanford, with Michigan, and now with the Chargers. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but nonetheless, I'm very interested to see how he's changed this team. Obviously, I thought they were going to be improved, but not this way, where the defense was improved in certain spots. They were just a tougher team culture-wise. How nice is that to see just as a fan, but then just from an analytical perspective, this makes them as a true contender now, or on the verge of it at least.
Yeah, it was, as a season ticket holder, I've seen a lot of very bad games and bad losses to the Chiefs very often, for sure. And I expect that to potentially continue as well. But like the at Denver game in particular for the Chargers had been so difficult. For whatever reason, the Chargers could not overcome bad luck, injuries, turnovers, you name it, and they could not win in Denver. And for Jim Harbaugh to walk in and take this team and win in Denver, for example, and sweep the Broncos and win in that comeback fashion that they did at SoFi Stadium, that's something I'm not used to. And I've always defended, Chargers coaches and players and personnel and staff members, because there's a lot that happens that's out of your control. And I think as a for a fan, as long as I've been a fan, I expect things to go a certain way. Telesco was the GM for so long, a lot of first-year head coaches. So I kind of assume that's how things went with Chargers football and with the NFL and with coaching. And then they hired Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter in particular. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, that's what coaching is. That's what the difference a good coach can make is. Jim Harbaugh obviously setting the culture and the tone and everything, but Minter in particular, like I was a fan of the Brandon Staley hire. I know people will revisionist history that one, but I got it. They needed a different direction. Maybe a defensive mind, a younger mind, someone new to the NFL, that new flavor and the Fangio scheme and whatnot. But man, they just did not do a lot with great talent and expensive talent on that defense. But I just thought, okay, hey, you have great talent. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Then you have backups, and backups aren't as good. And the defense just isn't expected to be good because it's backups. Of course, that's how it works. And then Jesse Minter has Eli Apple doing pass breakups on prime time and having like guys that I've never heard of, respectfully, interceptions in Atlanta and sealing games for the Chargers. And I'm going, what is this? Yep. What is this new thing? So I was excited for the hire. He was my number one guy. I still didn't expect this. So I'm very excited. Hopefully they can beat the Chiefs soon.
Yeah, I'm a huge Minter fan. Minter is a great dude. Got to talk to him. He sat and talked to me for probably 10 minutes at the combine as we walked by each other. Just he's a ball coach, and you can tell. And kind of that there's a little bit of a shift in the NFL right now between, and I don't want to call it a collegiate mindset, but it's like it's back to basics coaching of like, okay, we have these players. I don't care how much we're paying them. They're still football players. We have to teach the fundamentals, because if you don't have the fundamentals, it really doesn't matter what else you do. And I think that gets lost in the NFL because so many coaches are insulated and they've never had experiences outside of the NFL. So they've never had a coach. They've never had to actually be like, okay, I have this like walk-on kid that I have to start. And we're at a Power 5 program, and I've got, our top guy, he got hurt, and now I've got to do this. Or I'm at the high school level, and we have to hide our field corner, like we don't have a nose. Like, how do we play? So it's like that there's a mentality within that new Raven system, guys. So like McDonald is in the same mold, Minter's in the same way. You even saw, if you noticed it all, Michigan kind of under Wink, he went away from the face melter 5,000 defense and back to more of this defense that we're seeing. So yeah, I saw it too. And that's it. I'm a huge Minter fan. Yeah, I'm a Broncos fan, but I'm not a fanatic. So I love Jesse Minter. Big fan of his. I'm glad you mentioned him.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty interesting looking even at some of the Charger stuff right before we hopped on. They're not necessarily grading out crazy high, but like their defense was pretty good, and they were a playoff team all year long. And they're probably like in more of the Chiefs kind of legacy, if you will, where it's just kind of winning games by however you can. And that's just kind of what the Chargers had to do this year because they had to change the culture of the organization a bit. And so that's what, and Jesse Minter was such a big part of that, obviously. And so I think it's really interesting. And we just released an article this week. Ladd McConkey ranked as the best receiver in between 10 and 20 yards down the field. And so, I mean, it's only there. And so, I mean, it's kind of suppressed to there, but it's kind of interesting to look at it where it's like, oh yeah, Ladd McConkey is Ladd McConkey, but at the same time, he was one of the best guys, one of the most secure guys for one of the better teams in the league. So where do you see the Chargers going moving forward in the talent space? Because they need guys, obviously, but they were pretty good this year, so they're not drafting as highly as they were.
This is the $1 million question, right? I think when it comes to the Chargers, you mentioned Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey, he was my receiver 5 last year. Don't ask me who my 6th was. It didn't work out. But my receiver 5 last year, I really loved Ladd McConkey. He exceeded expectations. I didn't expect beating Keenan Allen's single season record and then putting up a $187 or whatever he did in the playoffs. Didn't expect that. So you have yourself, it's tricky. And I don't know if it's because of its pre-draft evals or just how McConkey looks and that he's not 6'4" and he's looking like some dominant receiver. But it's like, is that a wide receiver 1 in the NFL? Now, in terms of the production and the per play stats and yards per route run versus man, what you see on film, yeah, like I think had one of the best rookie seasons ever. I think like 12th most receiving yards for rookie all time. And so for most people, you'd say that, yeah, that's your receiver 1. For fans, it's kind of split. I think the Chargers definitely need to get more in that room because after McConkey is why they lost in the postseason, unfortunately. And there's offensive line there as well and other things too. But McConkey did his part. But with Quentin Johnston, with now departed Josh Palmer to the Bills, so they signed Mike Williams. So Williams and Johnston are current receivers 2 and 3. That just isn't enough. And that's not going to be enough this year. I think McConkey could get you through things last year. But this schedule the Chargers are about to face, like they're not the last place team this year.
Right.
That's the Raiders. They have to play a much more difficult schedule and or keep up with offenses that are far better than the ones they faced last year. So is McConkey a foundational piece that could at least be a 1B? Yeah, absolutely. Like I love McConkey. I think he's going to do just fine. I think he'll have another 1,000-something receiving yards as long as his body can hold up and he stays healthy. But the Chargers need more after that because when you can throw everything at McConkey or play defense like the Texans did, and you say, hey, we've got Kamari Lassiter, Quentin Johnston, go ahead and get open against us, and it doesn't work, you get killed in Houston. And I was at that Houston game. It sucked. So I really do think the Chargers need to add more. Question is where? Because there's this discussion like, oh, Jim Harbaugh doesn't invest in wide receivers, or maybe they wouldn't invest in receivers because they're a run-first team. I disagree. The Ravens in particular, 4 of their last 9 drafts have drafted a receiver in the first round. So the Ravens with Joe Ortiz, granted, Joe Ortiz was not the assistant GM with the Ravens at the time or ever, but there's some precedent there. And Jim Harbaugh, I'm losing the name, but at the time, I can't remember the receiver's name. It wasn't Bolden. Maybe it was Crabtree, but they signed one of those receivers back with the 49ers in his second year to a big contract, like a pretty big contract for the time.
Yeah,
so
they'll Crabtree.
I think it might have been Crabtree. So they will definitely invest in those players and invest in receiver. So I think they could do it as early as round 1. The problem is it's not a great receiver class, at least at the top part of the draft. So they got to find somebody. They got to find themselves a true X on the outside. Yes, Mike Williams theoretically could be that. The Chargers have seen, we've seen that as Chargers fans for a long time, since 2017. Good boundary guy, unlikely to be available for a whole season. Can't be counted on at this point to do a whole lot more than that. So they got to at least add something there. And then I do think, as much as Chargers fans don't like to hear it, that they believe in Quentin Johnston quite a bit. I mean, Jim Harbaugh went to bat for this guy early last year, like in spring camp, at his press conferences early on. Like, this is a guy they believe in. And hey, he did take a step forward. But I definitely think they need another guy. They definitely need another guy in that room.
Yeah, I would say too, like with that, an offense that's similar in my mind, that's like very run heavy, wants to use big personnel, is kind of like what Ben Johnson was doing with the Lions. Now, obviously, it's a little bit of a different structure, but you see, like McConkey is almost kind of like that St. Brown, that kind of he's going to attack the middle of the field. James Williams can be what they want Quentin Johnson to be, but you have to have that other piece. Right, where, okay, you have Johnson who can kind of blow the top off and he's your vertical stem guy, but you need to have somebody that can kind of win outside. Where I do think McConkey, again, he can be that guy that just eats space in the middle and he can eat it up. But I do agree with you. You've got to find a way, because we saw this with the Rams. I think another good, just staying in LA, is like Cooper Kupp and Nakua. Like, if you're going to throw these guys 150 targets, they're gonna wear down. They're gonna basically, to me, 150 targets is like 300 carries for a running back. Like, you get to 150 targets as a receiver, like, and especially in the only way you do that is not with deep balls, right? You do that through the middle of the field, which we all know. You go through the middle of the field, you're going to take a beating. So I do agree with you. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds. You know, he's not a 215 guy. So this isn't like he's built like a running back. So I do agree with you on that. Like, they've got to find not necessarily a way to take targets away from him, but make them a little bit more targeted targets. Like, okay, this play is for him. We know he's going to be here, instead of just like feed him the ball, because he's the only person that can catch a pass.
Yeah, they needed their sacrificial X. You know, that's not a bad role to have. They tried with DJ Chark last year, and he was never healthy, barely played. And made any meaningful impact for them. So they just need that guy at minimum to open up McConkey, like you said, over the middle of the field.
Yeah, I think too. Like, I think the Conklin signing is a big deal, because one, you have to have a true Y in this offense. He fits that, but he can also catch some passes. So he can take away some of those intermediate passes that now allows McConkey to do some different things, instead of just always being that kind of like that 10 to 20 crossing route guy. So to me, I think that's somebody that I think it will help too, that not a lot of people are kind of talking about. I actually like that signing.
Yeah, me too. I think Chargers fans were getting a bit picky with this offseason, because they're like, oh, we got to go get the really expensive, really good tight end. Like, there isn't one in free agency. There's a lot of floor raising tight ends, and Conklin was one of those guys. I mean, the best, well, Jawan Johnson, as you guys, the Broncos fan would know, that was probably the best, quote unquote, best tight end available, and very good. Like, I wanted the Chargers to sign him too. But Conklin is definitely a floor raiser in that regard. Need him desperately. Need a red zone target. Unfortunately, with Greg Roman, like, there weren't many red zone tight end options for him, and that's not 100%. That's not his fault. You know, Will Dissly, love him, blocking tight end. I can't believe he almost had 500 receiving yards. That's not his thing. Like, Tucker Fisk, not his thing. Stone Smart was a converted quarterback who's now with the Jets. Not really a guy they, obviously were super involved with. So Conklin, even if it's 400 to 500 receiving yards, that's a huge jump up for them this year.
Agree.
Absolutely. I think taking a look at the Chargers as a whole, and the most frustrating part, and like the thing that kind of keeps me safe as a Chiefs fan, is like, they've had talent everywhere, but they've just, whether it be injuries or coaching or whatever the case may be, it's just certain things don't go together. But defensively, looking at the 3 safety model with, and Cody, you can obviously talk to this a little bit better, with Derwin James, with him being in and out of the lineup, he's one of the best safeties we've ever seen talent-wise. But with him in and out of the lineup, how frustrating is that just from a consistency standpoint? You want to see him every Sunday, Monday, or Thursday.
From a Chargers fan's perspective, it was very difficult to work through, especially after he got his big contract. Like, when you're a rookie and you're making X amount of dollars on the rookie contract, you're a fun player. It was a second team All-Pro his rookie season. But then it's like, once he got that contract, he wasn't living up to it. And as a safety, a high paid safety, people discuss like positional value. Is it a premium position, et cetera, et cetera. And with Brandon Staley, he never really found that original form that he had. And then he was just also maybe never on the field, or not as often as we would have liked. He also never had a running mate or several running mates to help him out to free himself up. This past year, not only did he stay healthy, but he also got Elijah Molden and Alohi Gilman returned, and he got Jesse Minter. And so all those three things came together where I watched Derwin James be what I think we all hoped and dreamed he could be with Brandon Staley and what he was his rookie season, just doing everything. You need me to shut down this guy in the slot? I'll do that. You need me to rush the passer? Good luck to the running back. Prayers out to that running back who got knocked over that week. So I think Derwin James, as long as he stays healthy, which he did last year, I think for the most part,
he did.
I think he's in for another excellent season.
Yeah, and I think to your point, scheme fit matters. Staley and what James can do with the multiple tools, that's not really what is in that Fangio system. You have guys that, look, you have to be multiple in the sense that you need to be able to play down, but you need to be able to play back. You're going to play lots of multiple coverages. There's not a huge safety menu for blitzing. There's not a huge safety menu for them moving him into the nickel. I think so. To me, it's kind of that. I'm the biggest Fangio fan ever. But in that system, there's certain safeties that work and there's certain safeties that don't. When you have a system like with the Minter system that comes from that Ravens tree, there's a million different ways that they can run simulated pressures, which just means that it's kind of building on that old school Dick LeBeau fire zone stuff of where we can send a corner, we can send a safety, we can send linebackers, but instead of sending 5, we can send 4. They're a big 5-man pressure team. The Chargers were under Minter anyway, but to your point, he was playing the position that he was built to play. And I think you don't want to live in big nickel, which means you have 3 safeties in, but having Molden, who played mostly free safety last year, for him, being able to move him into that safety spot and be able to do that. I think slot percentage, we had him at like 36% in the slot, which I think is perfect. He doesn't need to go any more. You probably want to have him there a third of the time, especially the more 12 personnel you see. So to me, I think a lot of it came down to, one, he was healthy and on the field. I think he played 16 games. And then also you're in a system that will utilize you and knows how to kind of segment out the defense to let you move around, but we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I think that's what you saw last year.
Yeah, and there was a lot of trust over the course of the season. I get it, with Minter jumping to the NFL with the Chargers, meeting everybody, trying to adjust. Okay, maybe they play like a bit more conservatively. I think Derwin, in terms of like the first 4 weeks or so, was playing way more back. And then slowly they started to trust Molden and trust Derwin and trust the corners, especially the 2 corners that they drafted that started to play more. And so as soon as that trust started to build more and more, you saw, more of that role.
Yeah, the corners, to me, especially with Tarheeb Steele coming in and being able to play that nickel position. And then you also had, Cam Hart wasn't terrible either. And so you had that ability to where those young corners kind of stepped in. They could kind of play outside. And so therefore you could then you could use Molden kind of as that tool to kick James back inside, down. And so I think it fit. And like you said, coach, that's a thing fans don't understand about coaching, is the trust factor. If you are not trusted, you will not play. And so to me, that, like you said, they figured out at about a month into the season, okay, these dudes can play. We can live in this. We're not going to do it a bunch, but we can live by doing that. And that's where I think that you saw that explosion. I am shocked that the Titans let Molden walk like that. Like the Chargers got an absolute steal, and a guy who can play 3 safeties, he can even kick out at corner if you need him to. He's a true hybrid guy. So I'm excited to see how they use him.
Yeah, and they paid him pretty well too. So I think they have big plans for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Chargers, they're drafting at 22. Obviously, if you could mock draft and get Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, you would if you could. But who realistically do you see them nabbing at 22? Do they trade down, up? They nailed Joe Alt last year. They've nailed both tackles in the last couple years, and obviously we've talked about all their different talent all over the place. So who do you see? Where do you see the improvements coming from, especially at that 22 spot, the first pick they'll be making?
I think you have to look at the easiest path to playing time, and to me, that is defensive tackle for this group. Not that Jesse Minter requires, an elite pass rusher by any means. Usually, it's more maybe run first guys. But they have that group with Tart, and they signed Jones, and they signed Hand. Those are more like run first kind of guys. But they need somebody. Like, there are too many good defensive tackles in the NFL right now for the Chargers not to have one. And there are teams that have multiple, and the Chiefs and the Broncos have had great ones for several years. And the Chargers, I mean, right now their leading pass rusher had 17 pressures last year, and that's Tart. They let Morgan Fox go. They let Poona Ford go to the Rams. They need somebody. And I think defensive tackle at that point is the most likely to play the most snaps early on for them, because they just, again, Minter did wonders with not much last year. Granted, Derwin James, like Khalil Mack, not that he had nobody, but along certain spots, in particular the interior defensive line, he did a lot with less. And Mike Elson, their defensive line coach, did a lot with less. But it's time to get a guy. The Chargers haven't had a rusher in the interior get over 40 pressures, I think, like in over a decade. And there are 19 of those guys that had 40 or more pressures last year. Like, they need somebody. So if I had to bet on a position, it's interior defensive line. If I had to bet on a player, though, I actually think if Loveland is there, that's the decision.
Yeah. I think if you get one of those, I think if one of the tight ends, even if it's Warren that falls down to that point, whoever is there, if there's one of those two tight ends for whatever reason hits, it would be really hard to have Justin Herbert and not give him a weapon, because then they're already going to run a bunch of 12 personnel anyway. Now you have a guy that you can put in the slot. You have an inline tight end basically that lives on the inline. You can do a bunch of different things. So to me, that makes sense. I love your point with the defensive tackle. I think that that's what you saw last year, was they essentially had two noses. And they were trying to play as much nickel as they possibly could. And so they didn't really care about pass rush there. But I think, as you stated, going forward, you have to have the ability with some sort of a 3 technique to be able to rush the passer. And it can't be a dude that weighs 320 pounds. I mean, if you could find a guy like that, he's an alien, that'd be awesome. But those guys don't grow on trees, right? So to me, I think you're spot on. I think that if there's one spot that I think that that if you could just get a guy plug and play, it'd be that interior defensive line.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So we've been talking all about like basically every other position except for this one. We just mentioned it, and it's that guy's jersey who's just over your shoulder. It's Justin Herbert. And when you have a quarterback of that caliber of talent, you guys are officially contenders, and it's finally in that conversation, because we've seen Brandon Staley roll through, Anthony Lynn, trying to see guys make it work with Justin Herbert. Now it's finally working, and obviously it was going to be Jim Harbaugh to figure it out. So with Herbert, we saw his most efficient year, probably not his most sexy statistical year, but it was his most efficient. We're seeing it now here on Field Vision Pro with only 3 interceptions on the year. What is that next step that you want to see from Justin Herbert? Because there's only like one more he needs to make to be in that upper range of Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Burrow. And so what is that step that you would like to see him make?
I would like to see, at least compared to last year, where they very much so struggled to do this with a lack of connection to Josh Palmer for whatever reason, the lack of a sacrificial X. It's time to find a way to push the ball down the field with Justin Herbert, which feels like what we say every year, but it's Justin Herbert, and you want to see him do that. And I think they just struggled to do that, to the point where, I mean, they had Quentin Johnson out there. They tried to do it last year against the Ravens. You saw 4 or 5 downfield targets, no connection. Against the Chiefs, there was a wide open play to Palmer that he could have hit, didn't connect. And so I think they had to adjust in like the last third or so of the year to be a bit more of like a shorter intermediate. And hey, when you have McConkey, you can do that sort of stuff. But I want to see him be able to do that and connect on some of the play action that, of course, Greg Roman wants to run. And I hope that the interior offensive line can hold up there. But as far as moving Herbert up to the upper echelon of quarterbacks, I think granted, I think like most people seem to feel he's at least at worst like top 7, top 6, top 5. So it's not like he has a whole lot more to go. But as far as that, like let's say top 3, I don't know if he'll actually ever get back there with Greg Roman. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think like, not that like this isn't a great ceiling, but like Ryan Tannehill with the Titans with Arthur Smith that year, where they had a great run game with Derrick Henry and they made it to the playoffs. I don't remember if they beat the Chiefs that year or not, but Tannehill had like a really good, like 4,200 yards, whatever number of touchdowns, good at avoiding interceptions. Like that's where I hope Herbert can get to from at least a throwing perspective, like get over that 4,000, contribute as a runner as well, protect the football. He'll always generally protect the football. People look at the Texans game and they're like, oh, Herbert like threw so many turnovers.
Yeah.
Like, he just had to throw the ball.
Yeah, he didn't
and
have
like,
a choice.
Yeah, he didn't have a choice. He had to throw it to somebody. And so you can't count the raw stats there. It's the per play stuff. He's very good at protecting the football. So I don't know if he'll ever really get to that top 3, let's say. Like he's not passing Allen, Mahomes, Lamar at this point. It's not going to happen, I don't think, in the next couple of years, especially with the weapons that they have. I just want to see the consistency, elevate the floor a little bit more. Again, a tight end like Conklin can help. One more receiver can help. Some development from McConkey can help. Just little things from there to where they can keep up with some of the better teams.
Yeah, I agree with you on the deep ball. You guys run the ball too much to not have isolation outside. You know, it's just, let's be honest with it. You guys run the ball too much. You have too many loaded boxes to not have some sort of isolation outside. And that's the one thing, when you do watch the Chargers offense, it's very much just like you're sitting there wondering, like, why are we not hitting these deeper balls? And I think that's kind of, to your point, is if there's going to be some sort of progression, it's got to be to not only can the receivers catch these, but also like Herbert feeling comfortable enough to throw the ball down the field. And look, you're going to have to call it in the offense. And I agree with you 100%. This is not going to be an offense where it's not going to look like the Bengals offense, where you're just 11 personnel the whole time and you're just throwing the ball down the field and you're getting guys, you're just feeding your receivers the ball. That's not what that's going to look like. But can he go over 4,000 yards? Yes. Can you push that 30 touchdowns in throwing? I think if you could get 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns, dude, we're looking at a top 5 quarter, because he's now hitting, and now he has that. What that tells me is, now that we have the people around us, we're probably going to win a playoff game. And that, to me, that's where I'm 100% aligned with you on that.
Yeah. Yeah. We've done the 5,000 yards, 45 touchdowns thing. That was awesome. They didn't win.
Yeah.
They didn't do anything. So if they scale it back a little bit, efficiency is there and they're winning, that's all that matters.
100%.
Or just go 3-14, and I'm cool with it as a Chief.
As long as 2 of those wins are against the Chiefs, though.
No. Beat the Broncos and the Raiders. That's fine. Don't beat the Chiefs. That'd be silly.
You got to give us one to give us some hope, man.
No, why? Just no.
You've had enough.
Tyler, we really appreciate your time. We'll give you just a chance here to go ahead and plug whatever you've got going on and get you on your way.
Yeah, so I'm Tyler J. Schoon everywhere. I just got an awesome Ian Rappaport follow yesterday, which felt really, really cool. I'm from the Guilty as Charged podcast. Obviously, we cover the Chargers. Yes, we don't like the Broncos. Yes, we don't like the Chiefs. Yes, we don't like the Raiders. But hey, we'll talk about all of it. We've got the draft coming up. It is the biggest week for most people, if not. Chiefs get to go to the Super Bowl. For Chargers fans, it's the biggest week of the year for us. Is the draft. So I'm excited to do that all. We'll be live all 3 days next week. I will be exhausted, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah, you guys do a good job too. I've been on your show a few times, so I appreciate it, and you guys do a good job.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Well, follow us on on X at FieldVisionMI, on Instagram at FieldVisionSports, and join us again next week. That's been the Field Vision Football Podcast. See you next time.